Imagine an ant leaving its colony for no reason. It climbs up a plant, bites onto the leaf vein, and refuses to let go. Then it dies there, but it's still hanging on. And a few days later, something starts growing out of its head. That's the zombie ant. And this fungus is a culprit, Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, first observed by Alfred Russel Wallace in the Amazon rainforest. That's the same fungus in The Last of Us. It gets into the host brain, takes control of the nervous system, turns the whole body into a... But in reality, it's even more horrifying. Scientists scanned infected ants in 3D and found fungal cells densely packed around the brain, touching and surrounding it, but it left the brain itself completely alone. The fungus instead builds a network around the muscle and releases chemicals that interfere with how our muscles work, the type of forbidden juice that forces the jaw to clamp down and stay that way. That is called the death grip. And even more stranger, the infected ant climbs to the exact same spot every time, around 25 centimeters off the forest ground. And this is not the only zombie ant fungus. Scientists have identified at least 35 species in this family so far, and if that sounds like a lot, there are trillions of infected ants walking around there. Ophiocordyceps kimflemingiae. This is a zombie ant fungus species that scientists actually grow in the lab, and they found that many of its genes switched on and off in a regular cycle over the 2-day period, like an internal clock. A fungus with no brain and no nervous system, keeping its own schedule instead of just reacting to the ant. But this fungus is incredibly selective. It can infect and kill almost any ant species, but it can only pull up the zombie ant behavior, the walk, the climb, and the jaw lock onto the species normally target in the wild. Put it in the wrong ant, and the ant just dies. This fungus also produces different chemicals depending on which ant's brain is sitting next to. It's like it's testing the brain first and decide whether the performance is worth putting on. Ophiocordyceps desmidiospora. Every fungus we've seen mainly goes after the worker ant. It kind of makes sense because the colony has thousands of them, and nobody would have noticed if Anthony didn't come home. In 2020, researchers found it on the founder screen in Louisiana. The ant whose entire job is to start a brand new colony from scratch. If the worker ant dies, the colony barely notices, but the death of the queen can erase everything. Interestingly, in that same patch of the forest also has a common zombie ant fungus, the Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, running on the exact same ant species, going after Anthony. Although they infect the same ant species, they do not attack the same member of the colony. One specializes in workers, the other specializes in queens. This fungus is also rare enough that scientists couldn't study it properly for years. The one specifically built to hunt queens is the one we know least about, Ophiocordyceps camponoti-floridani. This fungus infects different ant species in Florida, but the ants still end up doing the same thing: climb, bite, and die. Scientists wanted to check if it's actually the same chick under the hood or just looks that way from the outside. They compared this camponoti-floridani against its close cousin we saw earlier, kimflemingiae, checking which genes each one actually switches on to produce that same final outcome. But it turns out it was not even the same genes. The instructions controlling the ant behavior were different between the two, even though they are close relatives, and the outcome looks identical. Ophiocordyceps australis. This one also infects different ant species depending on where it lands. Africa, Australia, and South America. Each population just adapts. The death by changes height or angles, whatever fit the local ants. It's like a let's fuck around and find out approach. Now all the fungi we cover so far belong to one genus, Ophiocordyceps, and within that group, zombie behavior evolved and got refined multiple times independently. But here's the crazy part: zombie manipulation did not evolve only in this genus. Chapter 2: Convergent Evolutions. Pandora formicae. Cordyceps is not the only fungus that makes zombie. It's just the famous one. Pandora formicae belongs to the phylum Entomopthora. Ophiocordyceps belongs to Ascomycota. These are not close relatives. In animal terms, that's roughly the distance between a fish and a spider. The split between these two fungal groups is ancient, far older than ants themselves, and these fungi evolved the same strategy independently. Ophiocordyceps takes over the ant's muscle. It puppets the body but never goes near the brain. But Pandora goes straight into the brain itself while the ant is still alive. This is generally a neuroparasite, infiltrating the organ that Ophiocordyceps carefully works around. Despite their different biology, both fungi end with the ant dying in almost the same position. An ant locked onto vegetation before fungus releases its spores. Pandora neoaphidis. Pandora neoaphidis is in the same genus, but the host is one of the smallest agricultural pests, which is among the most economically destructive pests in the world.
What are these fungus even?
It gets into a winged aphid during the latent phase. Before the aphid shows any signs of infection, they can still fly, migrate, and start new colonies on other plants. They will have children, and they pass the infection to them. By the time the aphids begin dying, the infection has already moved through the lineage. That's why farmers are interested in this one. Researchers are now looking at it as a biological pest control, meaning a fungus that rise through generations of aphids may end up being used by farmers on purpose against the very host it evolved to exploit. Entomophthora muscae. This fungus manipulates the fly before it dies, and it won't even the fly
is 6 feet under.
Some flies have been known to vote after
10 times.
after they die.
Anyway,
Infected flies climb to an elevated surface before dying, glue themselves in place, and die at nearly the same time each day, usually around sunset. Researchers found that the fungus keeps its own daily rhythm, allowing it to time the infection independently of the fly. But even death isn't the end of the manipulation. Female flies infected with E. muscae become attractive to healthy males because the fungus produces chemicals that mimics the fly's sex pheromones. When the males attempt to mate with the corpse, they pick up the fly's version of STD. Scientists only figured out this process recently. Strongwellsea. Most zombie fungi kill the host before spreading spores. Strongwellsea breaks the rule completely. It infects flies, various species across the family Entomophaga, Fungi, and Muscae. The fungus keep them alive. They will fly and socialize with other flies, going about a totally normal-looking day for days at a time, while the fungus is actively eating its organs with an oddly specific order.
Spell IHOP and then say nest. IHOP.
Genitals, fat reserve, and eventually its muscle. And at a certain point of this process, it opens a literal hole in the side of the abdomen. Through that hole, it ejects spores continuously while the fly is still flying, and the fly remains alive. It continues moving around, yapping with other flies, behaving normally despite a big ass hole in its body. Researchers call this active host transmission, and it's genuinely rare as a parasitic strategy. Entomophaga grylli, grasshoppers, and locusts also face their own version of zombification. Entomophaga grylli infects grasshoppers, causes them to climb vegetation, grip near the tip of a stem of plant, and die elevated above the ground. From that position, the fungus can release spores onto the grasshoppers below. Infected victims die within the same 4-hour window before sunset. The fungus appears to be timing the death, so its spores are released when the temperature and humidity are most favorable.
Let's see if it's optimal.
After death, the muscular grip on the plant persists. Researchers have suggested the same tissue invasion that kills grasshopper may also stiffen the body into a locked posture, and that keeps the corpse in position for continuous spore release rather than falling to the ground. The grasshopper body is essentially anchored to the plant until they break down. This fungus can spread through huge grasshopper populations. A single outbreak can wipe out grasshopper across an entire area. Because of that, the fungus have been studied to help control destructive locust swarms, although it isn't being used that way yet. Chapter 3. A schizophrenic body horror experience. Massospora cicadina. Few parasitic fungi are as disturbing as this one. It infects periodical cicada, insects that spend either 13 or 17 years underground as a nymph before emerging all at once in enormous numbers. Massospora cicadina overwinters in the soil as resting spores. When cicada nymphs emerge and dig upward, they pick up the infection on their way out. By the time they have been adults for a week or two, the real third of the abdomen have been replaced by a dense white plug of fungal spores and tissue. The genitals are gone. The body is almost gone. The cicada has now become a hypersexualized zombie, dead inside, but still trying to hook up. It continues singing with the attempt to mate. Male cicada infected in the early stages of the disease have been observed performing the wing flick display that females normally use to signal receptivity, which attracts copulation attempts from other male cicadas. During that contact, the spores spread. In other words, the fungus is turning the male cicadas. Massospora cicadina also produces cathinone, a natural stimulant in the amphetamine family. Researchers suspect it helps infected cicadas stay active, although its exact role is still being studied. This is a cicadas STD that also is stimulant, something that's never been documented in any other species before. Massospora levispora. This is a close relative that has evolved an equally bizarre strategy. Massospora levispora infects annual cicadas, species that emerge every year. The disease progressions look similar. The abdomen is consumed and replaced by a spore plug. The infected insect continues moving and attempting to mate, and transmission happens through contact. But instead of producing cathinone, it makes psilocybin, the same psychedelic compound found in certain mushrooms. This is surprising because psilocybin was previously known to occur in only Basidiomycota, the group that includes mushroom. This means that Massospora levispora had appeared in a completely separate fungal lineage. But why psilocybin specifically? Scientists still do not fully understand. In humans and other vertebrates, psilocybin acts on serotonin receptors, but cicadas are built different, so scientists can't assume it has the same effect. Eryniopsis lampyridarum, soldier beetles, Scholianathus species, are common on late summer wildflowers in North America. They gather on flower heads to feed and mate. This fungus uses that behavior against them. Infected beetles climb onto the flower head shortly before they die and climb their mandibles into the plant tissue. But the torture is not over after it dies. Between roughly midnight and 7 a.m., the dead beetle wings cover, the elytra begin to rise. The beetle has been dead for hours at this time, and is not lifting its wings on purpose. As the fungus grows inside its thorax, it slowly pushes the wings open from the inside. The whole process can take several hours. By morning, the wings are fully spread, and other beetles start arriving at the flowers. A spread-winged beetle on a flower is coincidentally a social signal. Other social beetles are attracted to it. The posture resembles an insect that is active and present, which in aggregating species draws others in. The arriving beetle makes contact with spores-producing structure on the corpse and carry the infection away. So instead of merely killing its host, the fungus continues directing the body's movement after death, maximizing the chances that visiting beetle will brush against the infectious spores. Gibellula attenboroughii, the newest member of this remarkable group, extends the zombie fungus story beyond insects. It was first noticed during BBC Winter Watch filming in 2021 on the ceiling of an abandoned gunpowder storehouse in Northern Ireland. These were off-weaving cave spiders, the kind that normally hide deep inside cracks and other dark hidden places. An infected spider was found dead on the wall in an exposed position, covered in white fungal growth. As more spiders turned up, the same pattern kept appearing. Spiders that should have stayed hidden had all left the shelters before they died. This allows the fungus to grow elaborate white structures that release spores into the air. The fungus belongs to the family Cordycepitaceae, putting it in the same broader group as Ophiocordyceps, but Gibellula as a genus has been evolving separately. As a spider specialist, it is again a different lineage that converged on the same manipulation outcome in a completely different arthropod class in a cave in Ireland named after the legend David Attenborough. If zombie fungi have independently evolved to control spiders in cave environments, then the question is, where else could this happen? The 35 species in the Ophiocordyceps unilateralis complex alone suggest the known list is a fraction of what exists. Gibellula attenboroughii was sitting on a cave ceiling in Northern Ireland, formerly unknown to science, until someone pointed a camera at it.